I'm great, thank you. It's
We're
great
all
being here.
fascinated. We've been talking off camera. We're fascinated.
Yeah.
He knows his stuff because we
does.
peppered you with every conspiracy theory, and you knew the answer to all of it.
Viewers across the world are stunned as shocking footage surfaces from the basement of Expedition Bigfoot star Bryce Johnson. What was meant to be a simple renovation project has turned into a chilling discovery that no one was prepared for. Local authorities have sealed off the area, while Bryce's team remains tight-lipped about what they found. Some claim it's evidence that could change everything we know about the Bigfoot legend. Others whisper it's something far more sinister, something that was never meant to be uncovered. Stay with us as we reveal the mysterious events leading to the discovery and what really lies beneath Bryce Johnson's home. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens next will leave you speechless. It all began when Bryce Johnson, known for his relentless investigations into the unknown, decided to make some upgrades to his Oregon property, a quiet cabin he'd purchased years ago as a retreat from filming Expedition Bigfoot. For months, he had mentioned odd occurrences around the place, strange thumping sounds at night, objects moving without explanation, and even faint guttural noises that seemed to come from below the floorboards. At first, Bryce dismissed them as wild animals or the settling of an old house, but things escalated when his security cameras began capturing motion alerts from the basement, despite the fact that no one was inside. One night, while reviewing footage, he saw something that froze him in place, a shadowy figure appearing for less than 2 seconds behind a stack of boxes before vanishing. The next morning, he decided to investigate in person. He called a close friend and fellow cryptid researcher to join him, believing it might be some sort of wildlife that found its way in. But when they descended the narrow staircase, what they found wasn't an animal. It was a hidden panel in the concrete wall, sealed with rusted bolts and layers of old paint. Bryce had never noticed it before. The panel seemed deliberately disguised, almost as if someone wanted it to stay unnoticed. The two men decided to open it, but the moment Bryce began loosening the bolts, an intense, musty odor filled the basement, like damp earth mixed with something metallic. Inside the dark cavity was a narrow passageway leading deeper underground. Bryce filmed everything, whispering in disbelief, as the beam of his flashlight revealed brick-lined walls, old tools, and what appeared to be symbols carved into the stone. "Someone built this for a reason," he muttered. As they moved further in, the passage curved sharply, revealing a small chamber that would soon change everything they thought they knew about the house, and possibly the Expedition Bigfoot mission itself. Bryce and his friend exchanged uneasy glances as they stepped into the narrow chamber. The air was damp and heavy, filled with the unmistakable scent of decay. On the far side of the room, half buried under layers of dust, stood an old wooden chest, reinforced with iron bands. Someone had clearly gone to great lengths to hide it. Bryce, always methodical, began documenting everything on camera. His voice trembled as he described what he saw. Strange markings on the walls that resembled a blend of tribal patterns and mathematical sequences. His friend brushed away dirt from the chest's lid, revealing something even more disturbing. A handprint burned into the wood, as if pressed there by intense heat. Bryce hesitated before forcing the lock open. Inside lay a collection of notebooks, brittle photographs, and glass jars containing fragments of what looked like animal bones, but not from any known species. The notebooks were filled with diagrams, symbols, and cryptic references to Project S-17 and the Cascade findings. What startled Bryce most was a familiar name written across multiple pages. Dr. Richard Lemoyne, a researcher once featured in Expedition Bigfoot for his controversial claims about human hybridization in ancient primates. Bryce knew immediately that this was no coincidence. The deeper they looked, the more apparent it became that the basement had been used as a secret lab decades ago, possibly connected to experiments that went far beyond scientific ethics. In one jar, they discovered a preserved organ, small, gray, and oddly shaped. "That's not human," Bryce whispered. "But it's not animal either." His friend urged him to call the police, but Bryce wanted to understand first. As he flipped through the final notebook, his flashlight flickered. Written on the last page were the words, "Do not disturb the chamber beneath." A chill ran through both men. They hadn't seen any other entrance, but the writing suggested there was more hidden below, and as they listened, the ground beneath their feet made a low, hollow sound, as if something massive was buried right underneath. Bryce knelt down and tapped the floor again. The echo confirmed his worst suspicion. There was another space below them. His friend grabbed a crowbar and started prying at the rotted wooden boards. After a few tense minutes, a large panel gave way, revealing a vertical shaft lined with brick and dirt. A cold draft rose from the darkness, carrying the smell of wet soil and something else, something chemical. Bryce turned his camera downward, his beam catching glimpses of a metal ladder leading deep underground. Against every instinct telling him to stop, he climbed down first. The descent felt endless. Each step creaked under his boots until finally his feet touched solid ground. What greeted him was beyond anything he'd imagined. A massive underground chamber carved by hand. Rusted equipment sat in corners, their labels faded but still legible. Property of U.S. Geological Division, 1958. Along the wall, thick power cables ran into the earth, connected to old machinery that hadn't run in decades. Bryce's flashlight swept across a mural painted directly onto the stone, a depiction of enormous humanoid figures standing among forests, their proportions disturbingly realistic. "This wasn't a lab," his friend whispered from above. "It's a containment site." Bryce felt a chill crawl down his spine. He noticed dozens of sealed crates marked with government insignias, and the words, "Evidence Archive. Do not open." He approached one and brushed away grime to reveal a symbol that made his heart stop. A large footprint with elongated toes, almost identical to the castings collected during Expedition Bigfoot. He realized then that whatever had been hidden here wasn't just scientific, it was classified. Someone had been studying these creatures long before he ever appeared on TV. The documents in the crate described specimen retrieval missions and references to unexplained biological samples found in the Cascade Range. Bryce suddenly understood the magnitude of his find. He wasn't just standing in a basement. He was standing on a buried secret, one powerful enough to rewrite everything people thought they knew about Bigfoot, and perhaps expose why the government had tried to silence those who searched for it. Bryce steadied his camera as the beam of light swept across the chamber once more. His breathing grew shallow. The air felt heavy, almost electric, as if something ancient lingered there. On a nearby table lay a metal case partially buried in dust. He carefully brushed it off and noticed the emblem of a defunct federal agency, the Office of Scientific Intelligence, shut down in the 1970s for reasons that were never fully disclosed. The latch snapped open with a metallic click, and inside were yellowed files marked Confidential, Field Site Beta. Each page contained grainy photographs of enormous tracks found in mountain regions. But what made Bryce's hands tremble were the accompanying notes, descriptions of captured sounds, DNA fragments, and infrared imaging of moving figures too large to be human. One report stated, "Subject vocalizations suggest rudimentary language. Physical mass exceeds standard primate proportions by 600%. Bryce's friend stared, pale and speechless. "You're telling me they knew?" he whispered. "They knew all along." But before Bryce could respond, the camera picked up a strange sound echoing through the tunnel. A slow, rhythmic knocking that didn't match any machinery. It came from deeper within the chamber, past a rusted iron door sealed with chains. The men exchanged terrified glances, yet curiosity overpowered their fear. Bryce approached and began unwinding the chain. As he pulled the final loop free, a deep vibration coursed through the walls. The door swung open with a groan, revealing another passage stretching into pitch blackness. The smell was overwhelming now, damp moss mixed with old blood. At the far end of the corridor was what appeared to be a reinforced glass cell. Inside, under the dim beam of Bryce's flashlight, something enormous shifted. Its shape was obscured, but its breathing was unmistakable. Whatever had been hidden here hadn't been gone for decades. It was still alive. Bryce whispered, This can't be possible." The figure inside the cell stirred again, and with one heavy exhale, the glass fogged from within. Bryce and his friend stumbled backward as a low growl filled the chamber. Bryce's pulse hammered as he steadied the camera. The lens shook while the light flickered across the reinforced cell. Behind the fogged glass, a silhouette shifted, a massive, upright form covered in coarse, matted hair. The creature's outline was unmistakable. Every feature Bryce had studied for years, every witness sketch from Expedition Bigfoot suddenly seemed real, breathing, and terrifyingly close. His friend whispered, "We need to get out of here." But Bryce, overcome by disbelief, whispered back, This is what we've been chasing all along." The creature moved again, pressing a hand, if it could be called that, against the glass. The fingers were thick, almost human, but tipped with blunt claws. Dust cascaded from the ceiling as a low rumble echoed through the chamber. The lights embedded in the concrete walls flickered to life, one by one, triggered by their presence. Faded government warning signs glowed under the beams. Authorized personnel only. Biological hazard. Bryce's camera caught a faded tag bolted to the metal frame near the cell. Subject Delta. Retrieved. Cascade range. 1962. His breath caught. This wasn't a hoax, and it wasn't a model. Someone had captured what appeared to be a living, breathing specimen. But how could it have survived this long? The chamber's airlock design suggested advanced containment, likely cryogenic at one time, now partially deactivated by age. Suddenly, the creature let out a sound, a deep, guttural resonance that shook Bryce to his core. It wasn't just a growl. It was structured, intentional. It was trying to communicate. Bryce instinctively raised his hand, mimicking the gesture it made through the glass. For a brief moment, the tension in the room shifted from fear to awe. But then, the glass creaked. A long crack crawled across the surface. His friend yelled, "It's breaking, Bryce!" They scrambled back toward the ladder. But before climbing, Bryce turned for one last glance. The creature's eyes, large, amber, intelligent, locked onto his. In that instant, Bryce felt certain that this wasn't just an animal, it was aware, and it wanted out. The crack spread like lightning across the reinforced glass, releasing a low hiss as pressurized air escaped from inside the containment cell. Bryce's flashlight flickered again, catching the creature's eyes as they followed his every move. "It's waking up," his friend whispered, backing away. The temperature dropped sharply, their breath now visible in the cold air. Bryce's instincts told him to run, but the investigator in him refused to leave. He adjusted the camera's focus, whispering into the mic, "This is real. I don't know what this means, but this changes everything." The moment he spoke, the creature let out another low growl, this one vibrating through the floor. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. The glass splintered further. Bryce's friend finally shouted, "We have to go!" As they bolted toward the ladder, a deafening crack split the air. The containment cell burst open. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the underground chamber, followed by a deep, guttural roar that didn't sound like anything human. Bryce swung the camera back just in time to see a massive arm pull free from the wreckage. The creature stood taller than any man, its silhouette framed by the flickering emergency lights. "It's not attacking," Bryce whispered in disbelief. The creature was staring at something else, a small metal door on the far wall that had begun to emit a dull red glow. For a few tense seconds, it ignored the two men completely, fixated on that hidden door as if it remembered what lay beyond. Then, with impossible strength, it turned and tore through the rusted barrier like it was paper. The noise was unbearable, a mix of metal shrieking and the creature's labored breathing. Through the dust, Bryce caught a glimpse of what lay behind the door. Another tunnel, even deeper, leading into total darkness. The creature vanished into it without hesitation. Silence followed. Only the distant echo of its heavy footsteps remained. Bryce turned to his friend, both men shaking. "We have to document this," he said. "No one's going to believe us otherwise." But when they reached the ladder, they realized the worst part of all. The shaft above them, had collapsed. The only way out now was the same path the creature had taken. Panic surged through Bryce as he pointed his flashlight down the long black tunnel. The air was thick with dust and cold mist, and the faint echo of heavy footsteps still reverberated through the darkness. His friend gripped his shoulder, voice trembling. "We can't go that way, Bryce. We'll never make it out." But Bryce, pale and wide-eyed, whispered, "That thing came from somewhere. Maybe there's another exit." He switched the camera to night vision and stepped forward. The tunnel walls were lined with steel support beams and old wiring, some still humming faintly, as if power was being drawn from somewhere deep below. Every step echoed like thunder. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Old filing cabinets stood against the walls, filled with waterlogged documents, all stamped "Classified, Biological Experimental Unit." Inside were references to operations conducted in the 1960s, projects that aimed to bridge evolutionary gaps using hybrid DNA sequences. "This wasn't just containment," Bryce murmured, scanning the papers. "They were trying to create something." His friend's flashlight flickered over what looked like an old operating station, rusted tables, cracked restraints, and a glass tank large enough to hold a man. Within the tank floated something skeletal, twisted and part organic, part machine. They recoiled. "They were building it," Bryce whispered, "and maybe they succeeded." Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed from behind them. The creature was back. Its silhouette filled the tunnel entrance, shoulders brushing both walls. It didn't charge. It watched. Then, as if recognizing Bryce, it turned slightly, motioning with its arm toward a faint light further down the corridor. "It's guiding us," Bryce said. Heart pounding, they followed. The tunnel opened into a massive cavern where dozens of identical cells stretched into darkness. Most were empty, but one still held something alive. Smaller, thinner, its glowing eyes reflecting the flashlight. "There's more than one," Bryce whispered. Just then, the lights flickered violently. The camera's feed cut in and out. The creature roared again, shaking the walls, not in anger, but in warning. Water began dripping from the ceiling. A low rumble followed, deep and growing louder. The entire structure was collapsing. Bryce shouted, "Move!" They sprinted toward the faint light the creature had shown them, unsure if it was a way out or something far worse. Bryce and his friend raced toward the faint light, hearts pounding as the walls behind them caved in. Dust filled the air, making it hard to see or breathe. The tunnel shook violently, each crash echoing like thunder underground. The sound of twisted metal and rushing water grew louder. The facility was collapsing. Bryce shouted, "This whole place is coming down!" His flashlight beam caught the creature one last time, standing back in the chamber, roaring not in rage, but defiance. It was holding the collapsing beams apart, giving them time to escape. Bryce turned back, torn between filming the impossible moment and surviving it. "Come on!" his friend screamed, yanking his arm. They ran until the narrow tunnel opened into a sloped corridor leading upward. The light ahead grew brighter, daylight. They burst out through a crumbling vent into the forest behind Bryce's property, collapsing on the damp earth, gasping for air. For several minutes, neither man spoke. Finally, Bryce lifted his camera, still recording, and whispered, "It saved us." When they looked back toward the vent, the ground buckled. A sinkhole opened where the tunnel had been, swallowing the last visible trace of the underground facility. Within seconds, it was as if it had never existed. Hours later, authorities arrived after a 911 call from Bryce's neighbor, who'd heard the explosion-like tremors. But when rescue teams searched the basement, the supposed passage was gone, replaced by solid earth. Bryce's recordings, however, told another story. In the footage later leaked online, viewers could clearly see the markings, the sealed containers, and, most chilling of all, the silhouette behind the glass. Experts dismissed it as special effects, a publicity stunt for Expedition Bigfoot. But those who had followed Bryce's work knew he wasn't capable of fabricating something so elaborate. Bryce himself went silent for weeks. When he finally spoke publicly, his voice was shaken, but resolute. "I can't explain what we saw down there," he said during a live stream, but whatever it wasn't supposed to be found. He revealed that government officials had visited his home days later, confiscating his footage and warning him to drop the story for his own safety. But somehow, one copy survived, the one his friend secretly backed up before authorities arrived. That video, uploaded anonymously, has since been viewed millions of times, with researchers and skeptics analyzing every frame. Some claim they hear faint voices in the background of the footage, as if the creature was speaking. Others insist the figure was a guardian, protecting something ancient buried beneath the Cascades. Bryce has refused to film inside his basement ever since. He sold the property months later and moved to a secluded area in Montana, saying he wanted peace. Though locals report he still sets up night vision cameras in the woods near his home. As for the basement, what's left of it remains sealed under tons of earth. But according to those close to Bryce, sometimes, late at night, he receives motion alerts from his old security system. One camera still online, somewhere beneath the ground. The footage is always the same. A single shadow moving through the dark, pausing for a moment, then disappearing back into the blackness.